One thing I really like about Shadow Generations is how expansive Shadow's moveset is, especially compared to Sonic's. He has way more tools to work with to help him traverse through the level, like a homing attack that doubles as a teleporter, a plethora of new abilities thanks to his Black Arms DNA, this diagonal skate move when you hold down the bumpers, just to name a few. Now, I remember some crazy lunatic played Sonic Forces without using the analog stick, and shockingly, only 50% of the game was beatable like that. So I started to wonder, with Shadow actually having a good toolkit here, plus the level design now being more competent, would that same challenge fare better or worse in this game? I don't know. So, let's find out how many levels in Shadow Generations can be completed without the analog stick. Of course, the goal is to reach the end of the level by any means possible, just as long as we never touch the left stick. Everything else is fair game. I'll be using the Xbox One version, and as usual, it'll be on actual hardware. Everything is laid out, so let's get this whole thing started with the opening level, Space Colony Arc Act 1. So how exactly can Shadow move now that he's lost his analog privileges? There are two major things that we'll be relying on for this challenge. First, I'm pretty sure you're already thinking about it, the boost. Holding down the right trigger will boost Shadow forwards as long as there's juice in the gauge. Just like in Sonic Generations and Sonic Unleashed, we can fill it up by collecting rings. Unlike those games, and all the other boost games, Shadow starts off with a full tank of gas, which makes our lives so much easier. Now, let's pretend our boost is dried up, or maybe we'd want to preserve it for later. How would we get around then? Well, this is where the left and right bumpers come in handy. Pressing either of them on the ground lets us perform a sidestep just like how Sonic's would function. Here's the cool part, Shadow has a variation of that when used in the air. He'll plummet forwards in a diagonal direction with a little slide at the end. Of course, it's a lot slower than the boost, but I can definitely see this saving our butts in a few moments. With those at our disposal, the first 30 seconds or so went fine and dandy. But right after the green token, we run into a problem. The obvious thing to do is jump and press the bumper to land on the elevated path. However, for absolutely no reason, pressing either bumper in the air will send us away from where we need to go. On the ground, it's totally fine, but the air one is being complicated. How can we get ourselves out of this predicament? Well, there is one thing we could do. Shadow will always boost in whatever direction he's facing. While he performs the aerial slide, which I'm dubbing the air dodge just for simplicity's sake, the game considers him to be facing the diagonal direction he is plummeting in. So with that in mind, pressing the boost during the diagonal plummet of the air dodge will change where Shadow is facing. We can use this to turn around in that little section that's giving us trouble. Also, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call that whole process finagling, because this'll pop up a couple of times in the video. As long as there's juice in our boost gauge, we can finagle Shadow to wherever makes us comfortable. Just be sure to stomp after boosting to keep us from falling off the ledge, and make sure to reposition with the sidestep whenever necessary. We pulled a 180, and that was enough to make the jump. After that debacle, things were going pretty smoothly until we started hallucinating about Radical Highway. Near the end of this illusion, we have to slide down a building. Unfortunately for us, Shadow's moveset gets heavily nerfed when doing that. He can only jump, throw chaos spears, and move with the analog stick. We come to a point where the game naturally brings us far over to the left side, and Shadow slips off the side. With a well-timed jump, we can actually avoid the corners to keep us from falling, but shortly after, we find out that we have no way to turn ourselves into the dash panel at the end. There are a number of dash rings we can access when jumping off of these ramps, but none of them put us in the right position to bring us to the home stretch. Jumping in general will slightly change our trajectory, but that doesn't really benefit us in the long run. I couldn't think of any other plausible way out of this, so I was beginning to think this was a no-go. And just when I thought we hit a brick wall, I see this. Yeah, I don't know why, but there is a very tiny window before landing on the building where we have control over Shadow. Well, more specifically, I think the only realistic thing we can do is double jump. If we stomp after the jump, we can see Shadow is still crouching and hasn't started sliding. The only thing we can do while crouching is move with the analog stick, so that's out of the question. Boosting after the jump doesn't really change our overall position, so that's also a dud. Well, there is only one other thing we can do, although I'm not really sure what pressing the bumpers would do here. Ooh. Shadow still does that little skid when he lands with the air dodge. Does that mean we still have our normal control scheme then? Could we jump out of that and go into another air dodge? Yo, Shadow can chain air dodges together. I was not expecting that. Alright everyone, say it with me, but I was expecting not to expect something, so it doesn't count. Yep, there we go. Well, there you have it folks. If we continue performing this trick, Shadow will not change to the sliding play style, which means we have control over where we go. There will be times where we have to boost out of the air dodge to reposition Shadow. Just make sure to double jump out of that and press one of the bumpers before touching the building. It's super important to not interact with any of the dash rings and any stray boost panels because they will put us back on the building and ruin our flow. I think it took about a whole minute to reach the boost panels at the end. The last thing to do is to give Black Doom his comeuppance, finally ending the level. It took me a very long time to figure out all this stuff by myself. You can actually see I maxed out the level timer. Moving on to Act 2, and it's already posing a massive problem. It's entirely 2D. We can no longer change which way Shadow is facing when boosting out of an air dodge. So if we want to turn around, we have to interact with something like a spring. There will be many moments where the game expects us to do some basic platforming, and that would normally be where the run for the level ends. Like right here with all the rockets, barely a quarter of the way in and we have to face left. There is no way to do that simple action here. However, I do have one trick up my sleeve, and it involves the Doom Wing. When it's activated, Shadow will jump much higher than he normally would. 2 jumps are not going to be enough to overcome this obstacle, so the solution is to simply do more than 2 jumps. And yes, we can do more than 2 jumps as long as Doom Wing is active. I'm not sure how many people know about this, but with Doom Wing, if you boost into a wall and wait about a second, you can jump out of that. And then if you boost again and wait another second, you can also jump out of that. Notice how I just did 3 jumps there, and notice how I can continue to jump. Yeah, we can chain these together to gradually ascend. Fortunately for us, this little rocket pod right here is in just the right spot to boost into. Once we climb to the top, double jump and boost to continue through the level. Unfortunately for us, we can't use that same trick to overcome this next obstacle. In fact, there is no way to overcome this next obstacle. After throwing a Chaos Spear at the sensor, we're expected to turn around. Jumping off of one of the 4 moving platforms doesn't carry any momentum, so there's no way to launch ourselves over there, nor is there anything to homing attack to help us face the left. I even tried messing with the corners of the platforms, but nothing happened. Darn, 2 levels in and we already have our first dud. Good news is Rail Canyon Act 1 fares much better. The main shtick of this place is grinding. There are rails in the canyon, hence the name. For lack of better words, it was very handholdy. Grinding has been heavily simplified over the years. You automatically go forwards, boost to go faster, and press the shoulder buttons to switch between rails. And we do that for essentially the whole level with little to no trouble. There was also our second trip to Radical Highway, and while it did slow us down for a few moments, it was nothing we couldn't handle. Just be aware that the 2 skydiving sections each require us to tank 2 hits, so be sure to stock up on rings. Overall, no real problems with this one. Moving on to Act 2, and but hold up, it seems that we're able to use Chaos Control. Let me do that real quick. Oh, geez, we're already at the end of the level. Okay. Wow, we even got the S rank too. We are so good at this game, y'all. From the depths of hell awaits Bio-Lizard, our... No, that's not right. From the depths of hell, I was about to say it again. From the depths of the Cannon's Core awaits Bio-Lizard, our first boss battle. He must have been super mad about only being the prototype because he sure didn't hold back in the first phase. After a few seconds, he starts charging at us. Since we begin facing each other, Shadow has to sidestep quickly to grab some rings, then finagle to where the sidesteps take us away from Bio-Lizard. There's a couple of sketchy things about this section. First, sometimes the sidestep direction would change. Here I'm pressing LB to evade to the left, and then suddenly we move towards him like it was a misclick. We also have to elude his pouty charges 3 times, one from the front, one from the back, and a short one from the front. Eventually the stars align and we were just able to nimbly avoid the 3rd charge, with a few sidesteps that changed directions that honestly should have gotten us killed. Shadow was actually in a blind spot for when the Bio-Lizard started barfing up Shadow Balls. Grind up to the wire to pummel the weak point, and that, thankfully, starts Phase 2. Good news is that it is much more lenient and forgiving, as the attacks are easier to dodge, and destroying the arms grants us rings. Repeat 3 times, then move on to the final phase, which was absolutely nothing. Oh, we could have gotten an S rank if we were a little bit faster. That's actually kinda crazy, okay. Kingdom Valley, Act 1, focuses on Doom Surfing, an ability that, as the name implies, lets us surf on the water. For those unaware, this specific skill automatically propels us forwards when it's being used. We can also press the bumpers to perform a spin attack, which also shifts us over. It's basically a fancier version of grinding, so no trouble there. Oh gosh, what happened to my voice? The level as a whole was very open. Aside from this one room where we had to defeat all the enemies, there weren't any real moments where we had to finagle. It was very straightforward and perfectly doable. For Act 2, there are many Doom Blast sections. The first one goes well, but the second one puts us in a very bad position. There's a Black Warrior and 2 Egg Busters, followed by some basic platforming and a wind switch. With no springs to interact with, we have no way to turn ourselves around during the platforming. But there is a way to make it to the wind switch, though. After we launch an enemy with Doom Blast, we can press the B button to teleport Shadow to the launched enemy's current location. So with that, even though we can't aim with the analog stick, we can position Shadow before the platforming section. Just mash B after the launch, then jump and quickly homing attack the wind switch. From there, we curl up into a ball and cry, because even though we activated the wind rail, Shadow is facing the wrong way and can't access it. The homing attack's range is much more limited in 2D. I am so sad this is how we go out. Sunset Heights is next on the list. With it being the Force's representation, it should come as no surprise that both acts were as easy as piss. Metal Overlord is exclusively designated for Doom Surfing, so okay, yeah, I know that was the easy joke, but even so, I think I was a little too harsh there. Act 1 really was nothing special. The edibles kicked in about halfway through, and we were running inside some tubes in Radical Highway. These were automated sections, just in case you couldn't tell this was part of the Force's level. In Act 2, we had to use a little bit of brain power. Shortly after the first checkpoint, this Death Egg robot starts destroying all the platforms we're supposed to be running across. This is another one of those times where the game expects us to simply turn around. However, we can jump through all of these little platforms. In fact, if you were to double jump off of this stack, Shadow can actually lock onto the robot on the next floor. This also bugs out the game because now a few of the platforms are lit up like they're about to be destroyed, but never get blasted away, causing the pulley to not come down. Here is where Doom Wing comes in. Get to the second floor and stand on the highest rectangle. Then with the extra jump height, we can soar to the main path and continue with the level. The rest was pretty straightforward, just be sure to stay on the bottom path in the sewers. Metal Overlord is exclusively designated for Doom Surfing, and that is literally all I need to say. Automatically moves forwards, can move and attack with LB and RB, and we can also press the bumpers in the air to suspend our descent, which comes in handy for avoiding the missiles in Phase 2. Did it on my first try. Chaos Island Act 1 is all about the Doom Morph, which we can use to grab hold of the like and subscribe button. The controls for it are very simple. Press RT for a burst of speed, A to jump, X is for locking onto stuff, and move with the analog stick. Our movement is much more restricted like this, so sometimes it'd be more beneficial to avoid morphing. Like after popping these balloons, we would normally jump onto the left wall and slip across, but we can't put ourselves in a good position to do that. So instead, avoid the morph ball and slowly plummet down the slope. Place Shadow on top of this little pillar, then jump and boost into the wall. Shockingly, there is a very tiny ledge at the bottom of the purple sludge. We can jump boost again to the opposite side, then climb up the elevated surfaces to continue. A similar thing happens at the next checkpoint. The right path has us morph, but with no proper way to successfully traverse it. Instead, take the left path with the electrifying cyclone. From there, we can complete the rest of the level without too much hassle. Act 2 is super dumb. Just past the first checkpoint are 3 slopes with an unlimited supply of futuristic balls rolling down. A neat thing about those hazards is that they will always launch Shadow to the right and force him to be facing the left. We can actually take advantage of that with the first 2 slopes. First, get hit in a way where Shadow gets knocked underneath these platforms, then we can make our way across. For the second hit, stand right at the edge of this top rectangle. The ball should hit Shadow and knock him all the way to the 3rd slope. From here, we're at a standstill. Theoretically, we could continue to get hit by the balls if we continue to collect the rings we dropped, and that would push us over, but what we really need to do is turn around, because the knockback is not going to be enough to push us all the way over. Although I did kinda find a way around that. I messed around with chaos control and found out that sidestepping on top of the balls can sometimes change Shadow's positioning. Like right here, he's literally facing the audience so we can comfortably sidestep to the right and continue. Although we do very quickly find ourselves at a dead end. On the plus side, I did find this cool glitch by sidestepping on the balls in just the right spot.
This is the ultimate power.
I just got this crazy idea.
Chaos control.
Huh. No, it's not useful, but it is a neat thing. It's morphin' time with Mephiles, so without the analog stick, this is going to take a lot of patience, precision, and a pint of prosperity. Phase 1 with the crystal attack isn't too bad, it just requires some waiting. Right before he puts it away, a little morph ball spawns in. Make your way over to it. Then when you latch onto it, try to position Shadow where you think Mephiles would move to. If predicted correctly, we can charge into him, which lets us pummel him into Phase 2. Here we can take as much time as we need. A horde of shadows, not to be confused with Shadow the Hedgehog, this kind of enemy is also called Shadow, emerges from the purple ooze. Not only can they be taken out with a single Chaos Spear, but they also give us rings and fill our Chaos Control gauge. Once it is full, let's see where Mephiles is in relation to the Morph Ball. If it seems like a good position, pull the left trigger and line Shadow up within the 5 seconds of time stop. Repeat that twice. Phase 3 with the falling pillars was nothing to fret. Grab the Morph Ball, glide up the infected one, then keep pressing X until all of the clones are taken out. Finally, Mephiles' monstrous form. Normally, there would be a shield around him that would take 1 or 2 hits before disappearing. However, one thing I didn't actually know until recently is that he will actually drop the shield if he attacks for too long. So while waiting, we need to run laps around him until he wears himself out, quickly align Shadow, then charge into his stomach. Also repeat this sequence twice. End it off with Chaos Control and the QTE to seal our husband away in the Scepter of Darkness forever. Now the final level, Radical Highway. About halfway through Act 1, we come across that sliding down a building gimmick again. Unlike the first time this happened, there is no small window where we can double jump to keep our base moveset, so we're gonna have to rough it out for this one. After the first 2 hazards are 2 routes cut off by a thin divider. And we just so happen to get stuck on the divider. Now from here, the most obvious thing to do is jump. And when we do that, Shadow will now be sliding on the right wall of the divider. If we were to do nothing and ride it out, Shadow would get flung off the side of the building. And if we were to jump here, Shadow would be too far over to the right to safely move on. Turns out we had to jump way sooner to stay as close to the center as possible. So for this next run, here's how it's going to go. Jump over the first corrupted bit, then purposefully get hit by the second. From there, mash the A button. Don't stop until you see Shadow jump on and off the wall. From there, we actually want to tank another hit from this corrupted piece. Jumping over it would have moved Shadow too far over to the right. Jump over the next corrupted block and Shadow should be in line with the boost panel. It doesn't shift us over far enough to the grind rail, so we have to jump over the last corrupted chunk. And surprisingly, the game will gravitate Shadow onto the railing, saving us from dropping into the abyss. This is taking us to the second slide, and strangely enough, even though we do technically touch the building, Shadow can rocket himself into the air with a well-timed boost, which lets him keep his base moveset so we can carefully traverse the slide. Be warned that you will have to do this on your first time through because the checkpoint is placed directly on the second building, so there's no way to boost if we respawn. Make it to the end and hit the spring that leads to the third and last slide. Don't worry, no fancy tricks are needed for this one. All we need to do is survive, which is thankfully very easy. After that, the rest of the level can be done with relative ease. Act 2 is the final level of the base game, and literally the very first thing is a roadblock. The opening skydiving section always ends the same. Lose all of our rings to the first hazard because it can't be avoided, then try to dodge the third hazard, which ultimately fails. I tried speeding up and stalling for both of them, but nothing ever worked out. And here I was thinking the closing act, which is completely 3D by the way, would be possible. I think this is what the young people would call a bruh moment. And to conclude Shadow's generation, we finally confront Devil Doom. And as much as I love to end this on a bang, it felt more like a whimper. The first and third phases are essentially auto-scrollers, and the Doom morph in phase 2 can easily be worked around with the abundance of springs and morph balls to homing attack on. Man, Shadow's second dad is really showing his age with that fight. Before looking at the results, there's just one more extra level to try out, the Tokyo DLC based on the third Sonic movie. You know that one video where someone beat Luminous Forest with one hand? I don't know why, but that was the first thing I thought of after beating it without the analog stick. I mean, of course it's not even that pathetic, but since there were no bottomless pits, it felt stupidly brain dead. Good lord, is there nothing to talk about.
Wait, there is something. Look at this neat thing I found. Oh, that's a beaut. That's a beaut.
And there is no Act 2 for this $6 DLC. Huh. Ooh. You know, this video went by a little too quickly. We don't have to call it quits just yet. The game also has a whopping total of 32 challenge acts. Each of them takes small chunks from the main act and add quirky requirements to complete. Kinda like what Sonic Colors does with its main acts, am I right? Most of these normally take about a minute to complete, just like Sonic Colors, holy crap. So, in rapid fire succession, let's see how many of them we can overcome. Artificial Chaos Counter. All of the enemies were in the main route. There were also small bits of finagling here and there. One Ring Challenge Level 1. With only a single ring, we had to be very preservative with our boost, but no trouble with that at all. Also, did you know that using Chaos Control fills our boost gauge? I literally never noticed that until now. Artificial Chaos Counter Hard.
It's just like the first one!
Crush with Doom Blast. Yup, even without aiming the Black Warriors, there were more than enough gun beetles right in front of us. Chaos Control Master. You know, if we were able to activate Doomwing at the very beginning, we might be able to jump high enough to hit the first spring. Sadly, we always start with 0, and there is no way to turn around to do basic platforming. I also tried activating Chaos Control to stop the falling debris in place, but they have 0 collision, so we can't jump off them to reach it. Crush with Doom Blast Hard. Near the end of the challenge is a spring that keeps us facing the right wall. We can homing attack the spring to slightly rotate Shadow, and that will be enough to Doom Blast the Black Warrior. After that, we can't angle our shot upwards, and there's no way to lock onto the gun beetles. I replayed this level multiple times, but never could I collect 50 rings to get the extra jump height from the Doom Wings. This is also a dud. Aim and fire with Chaos Spear. Well, most of it was grinding, so what do you think? Ring Collector Level 1.
Cool. I'm gonna have that gold card before you know it.
Aim and fire with Chaos Spear. Hard. This is one of the more difficult challenges, what with the abundance of needle flappers, laser flappers, and falling platforms. I was on the edge of my seat for most of it. Gather enough rings to take a hit, if necessary, and make those inputs nice and precise. Chaos Control Master Level 2. Slow down when the game tells you to, and you should be as good as gold. Dash Ring Rush Level 1. Originally, I was concerned about this part here. We're on the ground, and there's a set of dash rings next to the wall on the right. I thought we'd be stuck facing the wall after using them, but it turns out they're programmed to have Shadow facing the left when he interacts with them. I had nothing to worry about, and the rest was smooth sailing. Chaos Control Master Hard. As long as you know the layout of the level, and frequently use Chaos Control, you should have about 10 seconds to spare. Crush with Surf Spin. They literally left like 20 clusters for us to destroy at the end. Yes, of course it is possible. Ring Collector Level 2.
Cha-ching, 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 a ring. Money, oh money, how I love thee.
Crush with Doom Surf Hard.
It's just like the first one!
Only this time, there's only one box that needs to be smashed. Beware the pillars that pop up. Okay, I actually need to break this one down. So in the first indoor section, we need to be very resourceful of our boost gauge. For the majority of this part, we need to air dodge our way through. This first outdoor challenge is why we need a lot of juice. Boosting is the only way to clear the gaps. Now here's where things get really daffy. Hitting this boost panel and running along this loop track, I think messes with how Shadow is positioned. The very next obstacle is stepping on a switch, and we need to climb up these rising pillars behind us. Normally this would be a game over, but because of the boost panel and the loop track, Shadow is slightly skewed. I know he doesn't look like it, but watch this. Despite being in a 2D section, pressing the left or right bumpers can actually move Shadow left and right, but only for this very specific instance. Next is another floor switch with 2 egg gunners above. Step on the switch, then survive the robot's onslaught as we make our way to the floating platform. When we get close to it, 2 spiky walls will slowly close in, presumably to crush us. But that's what they want you to think. In actuality, they're only pushing the floating platforms into the center, which lets us easily climb them. Then just follow the remaining chunk of the level to the goal ring. Destroy the egg gunners. Ooh, we made a monstrous metallic massacre here. Beware the pillars that pop up. Hard.
Yo, check out this shit!
I'm just boosting into the wall and this is how the game reacts, like, what? It's so cool that we could do this here, but I'm so mad because literally right afterwards we step on a switch and we have no way to turn around and climb those rising pillars to the left. It would have been so great if we could do this one too. Beware the spinning spikes. During this one, I realized just how optimal it is to skip over small portions with the boost. We can go pretty far with this thing. The final room did kinda worry me a little bit, but it was all for naught. The spikes were fairly easy to avoid. One Ring Challenge Level 2. I wanted to scream, I wanted to shout, I wanted to let it all out, yes I did. Just like the first One Ring Challenge, we need to be very preservative with our boost gauge. Part 1 in the suburbs requires us to be very patient with all the hazards flying around. There will be many tight jumps we need to make with our air dodges, many times where we need to slow down and dodge the spike balls, many times where positioning is key, and many times I wanted to punch another hole in the wall. Part 2, right before the city, has thin-moving platforms. This is where boosting will be incredibly helpful. Although it is possible to slowly air dodge stomp across the path, flying over it is a much better way to keep our sanity. With enough time and practice, it is possible to overcome this difficulty spike. Beware the spinning spikes. Hard. This is a test of endurance. The vast majority of the time, air dodging is how we're going to get across. Boosting is reserved for the jumps that we absolutely cannot make. Reason being, rings are ridiculously rare in this challenge, and we're only able to collect 3 of them. One at the very beginning with all these orbiting spike balls, one that can be reached with a little help from this ascending platform. It'll give us some upwards momentum if we jump while it's still rising, and one all the way to the left in this green room. It doesn't fill up the boost gauge that much, but trust me, that little extra fuel will come a long way. There will also be a lot of very awkward jumps we have to make, whether it's from air dodging over the spike balls in this pipe, or waiting for these blocks covered in spikes to move out of the way. The final section where we ride the moving platform looks intimidating, but it's easier than it seems. The line of spike balls going to and fro the length of the moving platform is the only set of hazards that can hit us while standing on the ground. All of the other ones can only hit us if we jump. Also make sure to use Chaos Spear on the egg pawns to make sure there's less things to worry about. Once our ride comes to a complete stop, simply make it to the goal. Death Egg Robot Panic. After stepping on a switch, we are expected to turn around, which we cannot. Dash Ring Rush Level 2. Death Egg Robot Panic. Hard. After stomping down on some wooden crates, we need to proceed to the left, and we have no way of doing that. Cross with Doom Morph. I felt like a hagglefish in the market. I guess, I don't know, I've never played Splatoon. Chaos Control Master, Level 3. I'll admit this one was a bit spooky because of how it's designed. There's many moving spike balls, plus falling platforms. Of course it was made with Chaos Control in mind, so we need to abuse its power as much as possible to make it in one piece. Crossover with Doom Morph, hard. Only notable thing is this morph section right after the first pulley. Instead of boosting, continually press A. Jumping as the Doom Morph will slightly move us forwards if we stay idle. When colliding with the wall, Shadow will automatically change where he's facing. Once we jump over the cube, boost into the vertical sludge and continue to the end. Gondola Master. The gondolas that move in a diagonal direction were no trouble at all. The ones that go up and down are kind of interesting because we have two different ways to tackle them. Either A, align Shadow in between the spikes to squeeze past without getting hit, albeit the position is pretty precise, or B, purposefully take damage in a way that benefits us. Depending on which side of the spike ball we touch will actually determine our knockback and where we face. Colliding with the left side will send Shadow flying to the left and have him looking to the right, which is exactly what we need to do for this first vertical gondola. Likewise, hitting the right side of the hazard sends us to the right and forces us to look to the left. We took advantage of that to launch Shadow to the right railing of the gondola, away from that set of spikes. Since we had some rings, we can again hit the left side of this spike ball to put Shadow on the platform with the 10 ring. From there, we can boost on the right side and bounce on the poles. Oh, also, before I forget, at the very beginning of the second gondola, there's a pole on the left. Bouncing on it will keep us facing the left side, but if we were to air dodge into it, that will, for whatever reason, rotate Shadow 180 degrees. I think this might be the only one that behaves like this. Your guess is as good as mine. And for the third gondola, just be sure to eventually get Shadow facing the left so he can drop into the hole and finish the level. Destroy the Cyclone. Okay, originally I wrote down that it wasn't possible, but watch the screen. I genuinely have no idea why we're allowed to sidestep like that here. Anyway, for the mission, we'll be relying on the sidestep working like that for some reason, and taking damage in a way that benefits us. Touching the Cyclones works just like touching the spike ball, so we can use that knowledge to fudge Shadow all the way to the goal. Okay, but no, why does the sidestep work like that here? I can't tell if it's the Chaos Island terrain, or if I did something that messed with Shadow's position. I even double-checked to see if I could somehow replicate this in the other levels and challenges we couldn't do, but, no, I couldn't get it to work. You know what, maybe it's because Chaos Island is from a janky game. Maybe that's why it's acting so weird. Gondola Master Hard. On this first diagonal gondola, we need Shadow to hit this specific spike ball on its right side to turn him around for this next section. Once here, wait for the platform to move upwards, then boost over to the left wall. As you can see, we would be landing on the spikes, but that is exactly what we want to do, for the spikes will turn Shadow around. Try to place Shadow just to the right of that second spike ball. He should be in a position where he dodges that one, and the next one directly above him to the right. There will be a pair of hazards smack dab in the middle, so at the appropriate time, air dodge out of the way. The third gondola trip is a bit of an obstacle course. We could go about this the intended way by moving through the openings. Here I messed up a little and got knocked onto the left railing, but because of that we were able to damage boost a little. Now the fourth and final gondola wants us to use chaos control. Place Shadow between two of these 3 horizontal spike balls, then pull the trigger to safely make it to the rainbow ring and beat the mission. Balloon Rush in Tokyo was about as easy as doing your mom! And lastly, Ring Collector in Tokyo. I've got good news, the heist was a success and nobody got caught. Alright, nice. With that being the final challenge, let's look at the results and see how well we did. So, without the analog stick, we can complete 9 out of 13 levels, 4 out of 4 bosses, and 27 out of 32 challenge acts. Adding everything together will give us a grand total of 40 out of 49. And after doing the math, that means 82% of Shadow Generations can be completed without the analog stick. Honestly, starting off with a full boost gauge is a big reason why this was as possible as it is. That, in combination with the air dodge, made our movement relatively versatile. Now, if only there was a way to reliably turn around in the 2D sections. You know, that was a fun one, I really enjoyed it. I will most likely do another Pokemon challenge next. This time it would be more vanilla. Yeah, I guess that's a way to describe it. Thank you as always for sticking around for this long. You know, it lets me know that I'm making a good video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I am assuming this is going to be posted in February, unless I figured out how to make videos faster. But if not, Happy Valentine's Day! Happy Valentine's Day for all of my kings and queens and emperors. And now, the Patreon supporters, brought to you by Mod. Lots of spaghetti and page fighting, Master Sodaku, Fossil and Triff, Gianna, Tamar, Skruka, Mitsuru, Simp, and Tabitha, Harvey, Youssef. There's Augustus Rainier, Stop Motion Stylist, Soma, Banamber, RT, plus Matt T.O.B. and Delta P is floating in Mississippi. There's Sonic Meerkat and Irony Class with UFO Sunset Billy, Elijah Boneham and Luke and Z Matrix exceed the limit, yippee!